Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Port Side. I'm sitting out here in the garage and I'm preparing for the next tournament, for another tournament, not the next Open, but another tournament. And I wanted to take a second and recap my season so far and tell you what I learned and what I'm taking away from it. So what I'm learning so far is being a coangler is one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced in this. Being a coangler at an opens level anyhow is one of the most difficult things I've experienced fishing, and I've been fishing tournaments since 2006, and mostly from the front of the boat. I have done some local stuff as a co, but mostly from the front. And being a coangler at an opens level is really difficult. If you think guys in the front of the boat spin out, it's even worse. When you could see the pattern, you could see what you need to do, but you can't do it because you're not directing what's going on that day. You're just along for the ride, and a coangler never gets to fish the primary technique, the primary pattern, and the primary location. It just doesn't happen. We're always fishing secondary stuff. And you can still catch fish that way in a lot of situations. So this year's been kind of rough. It's been kind of up and down, more down than up, but I thought I could do pretty well. I've done well locally as a co-angler. I've done well locally and some regionally as a boater. So I thought I was going to walk into this and just, make hay. And that's not the case so far. A very mediocre season. I started out my season fairly well. Those first two tournaments, Kissimmee and Lake Cherokee, the guys I drew weren't on anything. They just weren't. But I ended up capitalizing on a few bites each day that really helped. And what I mean by that is they weren't catching anything up front, and I was able to sneak away and get a few bites. I made something out of nothing, and that's what you have to do as a co-angler. I'm learning, but I still didn't. If you look at those results, you wouldn't call it a success, even though I am, and here's why. It's because despite the fact that my guys weren't on anything, I was fishing for points, and that was my goal coming into it. And I salvaged those tournaments simply by keeping an open mind and fishing. Kissimmee, I didn't lose anything. I had 3 bites all tournament, and I weighed them in. And 2 of them were really small. That's another thing that's plagued me this year. I've been getting bites, but they all been, just barely keepers. But I finished in the 90s there. I finished in the 60s at Cherokee. I did lose one on Cherokee that would have probably put me in the money, to be honest with you. I finished in the 60s, and it would probably bump me up into the 40s. The weights were real tight. Then we moved to the James River, and I'm a northern guy, and even though the James is fairly far south, but I know the James pretty well. Fished it multiple times. I was really excited about it. I was really excited about all the northerns. This year I thought I could do something in those. Those were going to be my solid tournaments for sure, I thought. And it didn't work out that way. Day one, I caught fish, but they were all short. They were all 12 inches, and I weighed in 3 fish or 4 something. And day 2, I got behind a kid that frankly should not be operating a boat. Let's just put it like that. He did things that I disagree with, that aren't right, that aren't good for the sport, and it really put me as a coangler in an awkward situation, and in a lot of cases I didn't have anything to even cast at. With that said, that's not a complaint, that's my opinion. With that said, I did capitalize on 2 bites that day. Again, both small. I think I had another 3 or 4 pounds in those 2 fish. And that was the worst tournament so far that I've had in my Opens career, and it was really discouraging because I thought I was going to have something. And anyhow, my buddy just texted me and I'm watching it. And anyhow, where was I at? Oh, that was the worst finish of the year. Not good for points, but I thought, you know what, we could have one bomb, right? So that took me to Ross Barnett, where I really had a good one day. I had, a fish over 5.5, or right at 5.5 on day one, and I was sitting in 24th after day one. But on day two, I got stubborn, right? And this is where being in the front of the boat and then going to the back really hurt. It really hurts me because I'm used to having the primary technique, which is usually power technique. I'm used to having the primary cast, location, and the primary pattern. And I saw the pattern, I knew what to do, and I technically did have 2 of those, but I wasn't using the right technique, and I lost 2 or 3 fish that day that really could have changed everything. And I ended up the tournament in 44th, just 4 places out of the money. So that's, on paper, that doesn't look horrible, but I should have finished in the top 20. You know, I should have been way up there. And that's, I know they say it's part of the game, and it is, but there's such a thin line between success and failure in this, in the front or the back of the boat, that you have to capitalize on everything. I could have made an adjustment that day, and probably, in my head anyhow, I'm telling myself I could have landed at least 1 or 2 of those fish. I didn't do it. I got stubborn, I got lazy, whatever you want to call it. It just didn't, I didn't want to fish that slow. I didn't want to put a spinning rod in my hand. I want to keep the big rod in my hand and lay the wood to them when they hit. And unfortunately, you weren't feeling them bite. They were just picking up, run with it. And before you knew it, they were on the other side of the boat. And I don't know. That's been my plague. Again, so let's go on to Oneida, since we're on the topic of losing fish. Day one, I got a really good draw. The guy was basically a vacuum cleaner at Oneida. Again, this is another tournament I really was looking forward to. I did well in it last year. I finished in the top 20. And in fact, every tournament I fished on Oneida, I didn't finish outside of the top 35, I believe, until this one. Day one, like I said, the guy was a vacuum cleaner. I learned a lot behind him, so there's value added there. And I just didn't get the bites. I got a bunch of bites, rock bass, perch, and pike, and stuff like that. I just didn't get the smallmouth bites. I only had 2 of them, and they were small to mediocre, and in fact I had one die. I think I only had 3 pounds 10 ounces the first day after the penalty. But I figured on day 2 I'm going to take what I learned on day 1 and apply it, and sure enough it started working. Within 10 minutes I had a 3 1/4 in the boat, and then it all went downhill from there. We only smallmouth fished for about the first hour and a half, and I lost a good solid 8 pounds of fish in that time frame. And then we went largemouth fishing, and we were only 2 rod lengths, 3 rod lengths off the bank the rest of the day. And I learned stuff behind this gentleman, and it was a good experience. So again, I'm not complaining. Anytime you can learn something, it is value added. And I'm going to take that back to that lake or other lakes and apply what I learned. But it was just difficult. I ended up losing 1 more fish, and I don't know how. We were fishing real shallow, and I pitched my swim jig up there, and I was shaking it back, and this fish came out from a piece of wood and ate it. And I set the hook, and I had some drag slip a little bit, and he just came undone. I don't know what happened. It was the weirdest thing. If all the fish I lost that day, that one should have been hooked. So I ended up in like the 125th again. So this is my 3rd second triple-digit finishes so far this tournament, and that hurt. It really hurts bad. I am now in 9th place in AOI points overall, and roughly 300 points out of first place. It's not mathematically impossible for me to continue and win the AOI, but it's pretty darn close to being it. Those guys in front of me are really, really good, and I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to fish Chesapeake Bay and Hartwell for sure, but I may have to make a business decision and just bow out of the other two and put my resources either towards next year or other stuff this year. I haven't decided yet. So I don't know, guys. Being a coangler is very frustrating and it's very real, or excuse me, very difficult. Let's just call it very difficult. But it's also a skill set, and I am just not equipped at this time. I should probably keep pursuing it to learn the skill. It's different from the front of the boat, and that's probably my biggest hindrance right now. Is I spent years in the front of the boat, and now I'm going to the back, and it is killing me. And if you've ever done that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I do still recommend that everybody be a coangler for a tournament or two at least. Like I said, I'm learning a ton of stuff. It is an amazing thing. I'm meeting a lot of cool people, making a lot of cool friends that, you know, they're in my phone, and I'm never going to let them go. I'm always in contact with them. When they have a good tournament, I let them know. And I appreciate that friendship, and I appreciate the experience. I just haven't been getting the results. And that's fishing sometimes. Sometimes you just got to keep fishing and keep your head down. And that's what we're going to do. We're just going to pursue whatever we can here and just keep going back out there. We got to put the odds in our favor by fishing as much as possible. And locally, I've been getting some momentum, so hopefully that carries over into the Opens. We'll see. I'm about to pay my deposit on the next 3rd Northern Open of the season, and we're going to go from there. So guys, get out there and get on the water and try to catch something, and let me know how you do. I'm interested. Like I said, I could probably learn something from you just as much as you can learn something from me, hopefully. So until next time, guys, get out there. I'll talk to you later. See ya.